everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Mike Delisio.
Today we're taking a look at a game called Astra. Now this is a game about constellations. It looks, when you open it, like a roll and write game.
Yes.
It's not. It is a write game. You're going to be drawing with markers on these erasable cards to make constellations. But what fascinated me about this game was it was made by Mind Clash. Mind Clash is not known for small games. This is like, I think, the smallest one they've done in a while.
Yeah, it's a new kind of imprint by them. I think it's called Mind Clash Play. I think it says there on the front. So it's like for their newer, smaller type of games, yeah.
Right, they're known for Anachrony and...
Tricarion,
right. So I was just like, ooh, I want to see what they do with a smaller game. So that's what this is going to be. Mike is going to show us how to play it. We'll be right back.
Okay, here we see a setup for a 3-player game of Astra. The setup will be slightly different based on player count. There's a 4-player board and a 5-player board, and you turn that over and you got a 2-player board. But this is set up just for 3 players for the purposes of this overview. On your turn, what you're going to be doing is denoted on this player aid card. So this is the turn sequence for 3 to 5 players. The first phase is an optional phase, and it's called the ability phase of the game. If throughout the game you had gained cards in front of you that have a ability that is for a turn. So for example, this turn, you can choose to tap the card. You'd have it in your player area. You can tap it to do what it says. That is an optional thing that you can do at the beginning of every one of your turn. Many times when you gain these cards, they don't give you an ongoing ability. They'll give you some kind of an instant boon like this one, immediately gain 3 Stardust, and that could exceed your bag limit there. Okay, so optionally at the beginning, if you had a card in front of you, you could tap it to use the ability. But most often what you're going to do is you're going to go right into the action phase where you are choosing one of 2 things you're going to do. You're either going to do an observe action, which is the thing you'll be doing most in the game where you're marking stars with your pens, or you're going to take the rest action. All right. You can take multiple observe actions, but to do so, you have to spend these telescope tokens. You don't start with any, but if you get some, you put them on your board like that. And let's assume that at some point in the game I had gotten one of these. All right, so when you take a observe action, what you're going to be doing is you are going to be marking with your dry erase marker. You have different colors based on the players. And you're going to be marking stars on these constellation cards. So let's take a look at this Aries card, for example. A couple of things that we're going to see here. Number one is it has a particular element associated with it, in this case fire. It tells you how many stars are in the constellation. There are 6 total stars in this constellation, and it's worth 1 point for you at the end of the game if it is in your collection. A couple other things to denote. You have regular stars, which are these stars that just look like white dots, okay? And then you also have a starting star, which is this one that has the kind of circle denoted around it there. And then you've got these shiny stars, which are called grand stars. When you observe those stars, they're going to give you more wisdom. All right, so let's say that I'm taking an observe action. I've got, at the beginning of the game, you start with 8 Stardust. So I've got these 8 Stardust. I would not have had this. Let's just go ahead and say this is my first turn. I'm going to spend a certain number of Stardust. You have to start from the starting star, or if it is a card that already has some stars on it, you have to continue from a star that has already been marked. So maybe, I know I need to start here, I can mark off 1, 2, 3, 4 stars, and I would get 2 grand stars by doing so. Let's say I did that. I spent my 4 stars, there's my 4 Stardust that I spent, and I go ahead and mark, starting with this starting star, 1, 2, 3, 4, and actually, let's say I want to do 5. I'll pay an extra Stardust. Once I've done that, I now have marked off 2 grand stars. I can go onto my player board and mark off 2 spots on my wisdom track. You're going to get that every time that you go do a grand star. What is this going to allow me to do? Throughout the game, this is going to be a track for how many cards you can keep in your tableau. You start the game with access to having 2, the ability to have 2. And now I've just made it, because I've filled this star, that I'm going to be able to, if I'm able to, have up to 3 cards in my tableau. Also, it's points at the end of the game for the largest number that you have reached, okay? So that would be an observe action. Other players would then take their turns in order. Let's say that throughout the game, other players have been taking their turns. Let me just grab another color here. Maybe they've come over here and they've done some markings there, and I've come in over here, and I've continued off from there, and then a third player, since this is a 3-player game, is going to come over here. Then let's say that it's back to my turn, and I take an observe action. I would have to have the 5 Stardust to do it, but just for the sake of argument, say that I spent 5 Stardust, and I go ahead and I mark off the last 5 stars on this Cetus card, okay? And I would get the wisdom and all that kind of stuff. When you finish a card, you are going to take that card into your collection. And in this case, I would be able to do the instant ability here. Then what's going to happen is you're going to evaluate the other players that are on the card. In this case, orange and green also got in. You don't have to. I mean, it may be that you are the only one to mark a star on a card, but usually multiple people will be in there. And according to majority rule, they're going to be able to get one of the boons along the bottom. So in this case, the orange player, since they have 4 stars, because I marked blue marked the last star, they get the card. That's their, boon. Orange has 4, green has 2. So orange would get first shot at one of these boons. They might just take 5 points and go ahead and mark that on their player board. They might choose to untap 3 of the cards that they had tapped for their ability. They may get a telescope token. They may get 6 Stardust. At the beginning of the game, you have a track for this, and you start off with the ability to have 5 when you take a rest action in your bag. When you get one of these bonuses, you can go above your bag limit. So if they had 3, they could have gotten those 6 to get up to 9. All right, so that is going to be the action you're taking most often. Then this card would come into my tableau, and you would refill it with a new card. All right, that is essentially the main action of the game, is the observe action where you are marking off stars. The person who marked the last star gets the card, and then in majority order, they're going to take other actions. Let's say that at one point on my turn, it comes back to me and I have no Stardust left. I'm going to be taking a rest action in that case. All right? On the rest action, what you do is you refill your bag with Stardust. So let's say that I had not increased that. Usually the most frequent way you're going to raise that limit is by boons on other cards. But let's say that I had not yet. I would bring myself back up to 5 Stardust, because that is what my bag marker says right there. Then I would untap my exhausted constellation cards with elements matching the active, the active sphere, which in this case is wind. All right. That was just done during setup. You would turn over 1 card into the discard, and it'll tell you what region it starts in. And so if I had had any wind cards in my tableau, I could untap those, and then you advance the marker on the sphere board, okay? Once you have advanced past this line, you burn a card from the top of the deck into the discard pile. It's a way to kind of keep the game moving if people are not taking rest actions very frequently, all right? The one other thing that I did want to mention is, as I said, if you have telescope tokens, you can take multiple observe actions, but you still have to follow the rules, the marking rules, meaning that you have to either start on a starting spot or you have to continue from another existing spot. So let's say that maybe green had come down here and marked a few of these, and maybe orange had marked here and here. I could, on my turn, take an observe action and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and mark off 1, 2, 3 here. Okay. Then I'm going to take another observe action by spending one of these telescopes. I can come over here and maybe finish off this card by spending my last 2. Then we would go through the process that I showed you a moment ago. So that's how telescopes work in the game. You're going to continue to play through this until the end game card has been reached. And at the beginning of the game, there was a particular number of cards that you place this in, and you'll hit this game end card. And it says when it appears on the top of the draw deck, the end game is triggered. If it's the first player's turn, the other players take last turn, and it goes through all of this. Then you're going to have a final scoring, all right? And that is laid out here on another player aid card. There's a number of different ways you're going to score points, primarily set collection. You score some through the game, and then at the end of the game, you're going to be scoring through set collection, through having certain numbers of the same type of elements and having multiple different types of elements. You'll add those up, add them to the scores that you've been getting throughout the game through these cards, amongst other methods, and that will be the winner. The winner is the one with the most points. All right, let's head back over and let you know what we think.
Okay, the first thing I want to talk about here is the quality of the game.
Okay.
So it's a game that you draw on with markers, and your markers have to be different colors. So that's actually a thing for two reasons with the color markers. One is to replace it, you need more colored markers. A lot of times in these games, black, I just buy a pack of 20 black.
Sure,
you can't do that here.
You cannot.
Secondly, the colors here that they picked, the blue and green and the orange and pink, look remarkably similar under a lot of lights. And I played this game in multiple areas, and I've never not had a problem.
I agree with that. I think it's not even necessarily that the colors they picked were not the best, although you could make that argument. It's that these particular pens, the difference between those colors you mentioned, are not as stark as they should be.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. I don't even know. See, the thing I find interesting is this game didn't even need to use pens. You could have just had a bunch of cubes or whatever of your color and just put them out in the cards.
Yeah.
And then when the card's done, do the same thing. That would have been slightly more expensive, I suppose.
And I would argue slightly less thematic, as strange as that may seem, because to me, it feels like you're charting the stars by doing that. I know that might be silly,
cool.
But I kind of feel that way when I'm marking them with the pens. So I like it, but you're right. I wish the usability was a little better for it.
Do you like the theming of this?
I do, because this is essentially an area majority game, right? And this is not a theme I think I've ever seen used in with a mechanism like that, where you are kind of, charting stars. So it looks nice on the table. Again, the markers actually kind of help me with that feeling, but it's not the most thematic game in the world.
That being said, I do agree. I love astronomy and games. I'm a big fan. Constellations, when I was a kid, I thought it was a really neat thing. I still think it's cool, and it does feel like it was almost made for games.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
So the game itself is a game in which there's one aspect I think is really cool about this game, and that is finish the card, get the card. Don't finish the card, get a reward.
Yes.
That's very satisfying. I'm like, oh, Mike finished that card. I'm getting something.
Right.
And even if you go last, even the last place stuff on those cards, I'm like, well, at least I got something.
All you have to do is mark 1 star on a card, and you're guaranteed to get something good, right? There's nothing on those cards that you're not going to want. There's certainly going to be some things you want more than others, but this also leads to some nice decision making in that sometimes I will purposely not complete a card to set it up for someone. I'm hoping someone later in turn order, because I would rather have the boon. Right. Especially if I've got the majority. I'd rather have the boon, one of the boons on the bottom, than to take the card itself. I may not even be in a position where I can take the card, if I don't have enough wisdom there, which I mentioned in the overview. So,
yeah, I like that aspect a lot. I think it offers some good decision making. I especially like the fact that and obviously on your first turn, you'd be like, ooh, I'll put 1 star, 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. And they stop you from doing that. You need those telescope tokens.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of wave, is it worth it putting out 2 stars, the next turn 2 stars, the next turn 2 stars?
Yeah.
I'm spreading out, but someone who might take more is going to get some bonuses. They're going to they'll rest on their turn. I don't know. It's interesting. I haven't yet figured out the best strategy to that, other than getting some of those constellations that let you drop 2 different stars out. Those are pretty powerful.
Yes.
So I think the whole process here is an enjoyable one. I like the cards. I like the idea that you'll be able to build a little engine and do this stuff. But there are some issues.
Yes.
I think, first of all, that engine building with your cards is too small. You get to the point you're like, ooh, I can tap a card, begin my turn. Great, I do so. Now I have to go out of my way to untap it. That's work in this game.
Yes, because you can only, on the rest action, you can only untap cards that are of the current sphere. If you're in the wind sphere when you take a rest, it's only your wind cards. The only way you can get an easier untapping is as a boon at the bottom of those cards. So I agree.
Right, and I still like them. I just wish that getting the cards and pulling combos off of them feels like it's cool, but it feels very unexplored. It feels like it's just you get to the end of the game and you're like, oh, it's almost interesting, and that part of the game isn't as good. And also, and this might just be a me thing, I don't mind set collection and stuff,
Yeah.
but that card set collection thing is so boring. You get that card, they're like, you have 2 X's on it. Don't tell anyone what they are. And I'm thinking, for goodness sake, I don't even care.
Right.
I can't stop you from getting stuff you most of the time anyway. And, I got 4 green. I don't know. That end game scoring is very lackluster. That part.
It is, and you can't even really predict because just because somebody gets a fire card, you can't even necessarily assume that that's one of the cards they started with. They're just gonna, you're going for all cards are going to give you some kind of point. So I agree with you. It's not the most
I always
dynamic.
pick a card based on its ability. Maybe near the end of the game, you're like, oh, well, I have 3 fire cards. A 4th one will be a lot of points.
Right.
And I get that. That just part felt, I don't know, it just felt a little less interesting in the rest of the game. I almost would rather the cards have been worth more points and then they drop that.
Yes, I agree with that.
Now, that being said, I like the other stuff enough. I'm giving this a 7. I find this very enjoyable. I think it's fun to play. It's relaxing in many ways.
Yeah.
But it's also interactive. I get to do things on my turn, and I'm very interested in your turns because someone might finish something.
Yes.
And I find that to be fun. And it's also, it's a little clunky on tapping those cards, but it still is also a little bit of a pressure point. I'll sit there and be like, man, Mike, do not rest. Do not rest.
Right.
Don't rest because I need to rest to untap my cards, and Mike rests, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
So it comes together. I think the game is solidly good. It is a smidge too long. There is a few other problems that keep me from making it 8-9, but I would play this, and I would think it was fun to play. So I can't give it lower than a 7 because I think it's entertaining. So that's where I'm at.
Boy, we're very close. I'm at a 7.5, and you basically hit my touch points. My positives are, again, as you mentioned, I really like the theme. I like the just the interaction between the players at the table. It's just the right level. It's not a negative interaction. It's a positive interaction because even if somebody is finishing a card, you're going to get something if you have something on there. There's no cards that negatively affect what other people are doing. So the experience of what you're doing is enjoyable. I also agree it's just a touch too long. It just is a couple of cards less, I think, would be perfect. You know
But
what
then
I mean?
that kind of cross purposes with I want the engine to get going too.
Right, exactly.
I almost wonder if you should just start with a card.
Maybe, yeah, that might be an interesting experiment to try. But yeah, I enjoy the game. It's one that I look forward to playing more. It's one I look forward to teaching. The level of complexity of rules is very low, especially for the experience that you get. Very satisfying game. Just a couple little things that keep it from getting the excellent 7.5.
We don't know where our score is going to be before we do these, but I will tell you, I do know that we like it the most in the studio.
That is
so keep
correct.
that in mind. No one disliked it, but
No.
everyone else in the studio was just meh. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind on this too. But hey, if you do like constellations, this is definitely one worth checking out. So that's Astra. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
Have fun gazing at the stars.
Ooh.